Hey, this is Joy Gamoria with Hybrid Rituals, a platform exploring emerging tech through creative storytelling.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Selviz. I go by the title of multidimensional designer, but I'm a designer with many roots in the emerging technology and traditional arts fields. Um, I go by, again, founder of Render Media, currently living in Toronto, and yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Now that you touch on a few different fields, now what fields would you say best describe what you do?
I would say, um, like I mentioned, emerging technologies. So, augmented reality, virtual reality, um, artificial intelligence combined with generative AI, and more specifically the creative intersection with the technical intersection of these tools. So, I'm very like more recent title people like to use is a creative technologist. Um, More so because it speaks to the combination of creative skill sets with the technical background. That's also, again, my background is a bit of computer science as well. So when you combine, the know-how behind programming and more of the technical side of these tools with the creative, you end up being able to collaborate with both the engineering team and the marketing team and the creative direction team. So sort of like a glue between different departments is my role.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. What I've looked into about you actually is you started as like a concert photographer, correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's good insight.
No doubt. So I'm actually curious, like what kind of inspired your transition from concert photography to this kind of new will that's a creative technologist? You mentioned a lot about know-how and emerging technology. I'm curious how some of those things might have started up in that phase of your career.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I started concert photography around 12 years ago when I first moved to Canada. So prior to that, I was actually living in Kuwait in the Middle East.
Okay.
And I was going to high school there, and my first interest was drawing and painting, and then I got into 3D animation while I was in like high school. And I kind of took a pause from all that when I moved to Canada, and my outlet for creativity was photography. So I was doing a lot of street photography. I was doing a lot of like fine art photography, and then suddenly when I moved to Canada, going from like a society that was very different from Kuwait, like there aren't that many concerts or like public events like that, like there are in Canada. So
Right.
my first exposure was like the Welcome Back concert that happens at my university. There was one at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and it's usually pretty big names that they book. So I managed to get like a media pass, and again, just really enjoyed it, really liked it, and became sort of my outlet. So from there, I was lucky to start touring with DJs a few years later. Like when I was taking the final exam, I was like traveling for Coachella, flying with artists. And it was a great journey. But yeah, it was definitely a bit of an outlet for me to get all these things creatively out of me. And then on the side, I was still doing 3D animation, but I was limited by the hardware components. So I was passively pursuing 3D and all this sort of emerging tech, but not necessarily the best position to pursue it fully because of financial and tech constraints at the time. Yeah.
I see. Interesting. So you kind of were using concert photography as this like overall outlet, but you had in the back of your mind sort of like dibbles and dabbles and kind of touching into the 3D animation space, 3D modeling space, like emerging tech space.
Yeah, exactly. I actually started, so Rendered, which is my animation studio, actually started as a magazine, a university magazine. And the purpose of it was to give people opportunities to be able to photograph also concerts without, prior crazy, like I had to jump through all the hoops I had to jump through to get to that point. So I was lucky that, all the festivals and partnerships that I had would allow me to bring people with me, like give me additional media credits and passes.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up like bringing much younger talent to get into photography, videography, documentaries. And I was really into the underground music scene. So again, all of that sort of comes back to what I'm doing now in many ways. I still work with a lot of the artists that I used to tour with. For example, Troy Boy, who's an UK trap artist. I still create like music artwork for him using generative AI. I still create like his visuals for concerts and so on. So it is still something that's full circle for me. Like, yeah, music's still around.
Very cool. Now, like, yeah, let's jump into it actually. So you started with concert photography. You were kind of trying to find your way back to new media, so to speak, extended realities and things like that. Tell us about the project with Sora, Protopica.
Yeah, Protopica is a project that I started with Manuel Sainsily. He's a Guadeloupean artist living in Montreal. It's a long story how we, well, very similar story how we ended up working together, but um, it's a combination of his project and my project that were exactly the same without
Really?
knowing each other. Yeah, we both were creating in the space of Afrofuturism in the Caribbean,
Hmm.
and we were both, again, both applying our culture through a lens of what happens when you have emerging technologies that are evolving so quickly that now people can create, very high fidelity films in 3D animation with a smaller team, or use generative AI to fill the gaps in this, all the resources you need to do that lift. And we both created our installations at a time. So we
What
created,
time period was this?
it was like 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, so 3 years ago now. But I was sponsored by Meta to do an event in Toronto where I brought together like artists that were within the same description I just mentioned, and curated panels and curated art. And it's pretty cool because they also like had, a lot of ways of supporting that. And at the same time, he was doing his gallery event in Montreal for the exact same, everything I just described one to one, but we didn't know each other then. So we met maybe a couple of weeks before our shows, and I decided to go check out his show in Montreal. And then from that point, we said, hey, we need to collaborate on something. And that was how Protopica came about. It was the collaboration of both our projects that came together. So really what we're after is creating a blueprint for people to recognize that these technologies are, just not transition, like transient, or that they're going to just come and go, but it's really here to transform the way that we tell stories. And we really believe that that can help the next generation of filmmakers. We're already seeing it, and seeing people adapting these technologies in a way that we see in film, that we see in television, and that we will soon see in ways that obviously we're still in a period where everything's still very, the dust hasn't really settled in terms of the quality of the content that you see coming out of it.
Yeah.
But we created Protopica the film because we have been working with OpenAI for the past 2.5 years as alpha testers of DALL-E, ChatGPT, and all these tools that they've been putting out to the world. Very lucky to be amongst like a very curated group of creative technologists or people who have a similar interest of technology and arts. And when Sora came out, so when Sora was being alpha tested, we were amongst the first 5 or 10 artists to get access to it privately. Yeah, it was very low key. It was about a year ago now. My new Sora came out like 3 months ago or something like that. So we had maybe 9 to 10 months to really give feedback and use it and really hone in on how to get better at it. So how Protopica the film came about was because they had released a research paper on all the things that Sora can do, and they needed examples for featuring some of the features that Sora has. So one of them is called Remix, and the other is called Blend. So for Remix, you create a video or you input a video, and you can, with a prompt, tell it to replace elements or to edit. It's almost like video editing, but with text.
Yeah.
So if you have a video of a wolf, you can tell it, I want that same scene, but turn it into a leopard instead of a wolf. Then with Blend, you can go clip A, clip B, and tell it to create a transition in between the two. So that's how the film, if you watch the film with that in mind, you'll see that there's a lot of those moments where a shot turns into another very smoothly, very thoroughly. So it started like that, and then it picked up a life of its own when it was released by OpenAI's all of their channels. We ended up at a very international film festival. We created an art installation that uses brain activity to determine different parts of the narrative.
Okay.
So as you're watching it, it can tell you're seeing your brain activity in the same art installation in this TV. And as that's happening, it changes the voiceover based on your mental state or how you feel throughout the experience. And it's a very meditative, very cool experience that we're currently creating a second version for. We were going to be at South by Southwest, but very recently decided to postpone our appearance or the launch of this for another event. So we're working on the V2 for Protopica, the art installation, which again, it's very intertwined with creating films, but how do we create a film that is interactive? It's sort of the next stage of it, using biosignals or data that we can gather from hardware that's already out there. And then finally, last January, towards the end of January, we were picked by OpenAI to screen our film in New York at the Metrograph Theater for an event called Sora Selects.
Yeah.
So, over 300 submissions were made, and we were picked as one of 10 films to screen at that event. Right now, they're doing the same in in LA, and they're doing the same in Tokyo later this year. So it's really cool how they're curating different films from different parts of the world that really showcase, what people are doing with their tools. But yeah, like to give you like a TLDR of Protopica, really is a project of ours that we've spent a lot of love and time into because we believe in the future of storytelling being a lot more accessible to people that are not, just betting on the big companies and production companies to create the stories. But really, we think that the next big filmmaker will be someone who's half our age and somewhere remote around the world because the tools are really that powerful. So
I see. No, I'm curious more about this the narrative behind Protopica. Like it feels like it's a bit of a dreamscape, but I also noticed that like there are a lot of kind of filter effects used, like film strips and grain. Can you tell me a bit more about how like those creative decisions aligned with your perspective about emerging technology, but also kind of how they sort of inspired this kind of aspect of memories and dreams, how that relates back to your heritage?
Yeah, of course. So the film itself, talks about different themes. For Manu and I, like the meaning of home, or like feeling like home is really important in our work. So really, we're dissecting a lot of layers of having grown up as immigrants in different parts of the world, or really trying to put our finger on like what feels like home was the first part of it. So there is a layer to that, but also I think reincarnation, or like just understanding that decisions were made by an ethereal version of you in a different realm way before you were born. So whether you look at your ancestors or you look at the energy that's passed from one generation to another, it's making sense of that in a way, or like at least acknowledging that is indeed something that people experience. So we definitely wanted to touch on that. So when you watch a film and you see at the beginning there's an elder woman, and at the end you see a baby that looks exactly like the elder woman, it's just sort of like almost like cyclical timeline. We leave a lot of things sort of open-ended for interpretation, but really Protopica for us is a place where these things sort of happen. It's a realm that is again, the word Protopica really stems from a concept of protopia. And again, it's this sort of idea that it's more recent term that sits between a utopia and a dystopia, and it's sort of an alternative where it's not sugar-coated like a utopia and almost unattainable, or dreadful and almost down-putting like a dystopia. It's actually quite the opposite in that it proposes different solutions for a more proactive way of approaching the future. So really for us, when we think of a protopia, it's a sort of response to, we're quite tired of seeing films that idolize, something like Blade Runner. The world just goes south, and we don't really see the byproducts of, people really trying hard to change that narrative, or finding alternative ways of governing or driving society that's actually empowering. So like if the media is constantly putting this down because it's the most immediate way of storytelling is to consider the negative outcome of the world, like the world ending, something based in like a futuristic slum, all this different stuff. Is like we just didn't feel inspired by that anymore, and we felt like the response wasn't utopia either because it didn't feel attainable.
Right.
So we both in our projects prior to this, we were both thinking, well, how can we take a headline, like say a country like Uganda, like discovered like I don't know how many mines of gold, and what could that mean in terms of social prosperity if we were to create a narrative that takes that and spins it around in a way that it's actually providing actionable steps for that society to approach it that way. And it does feel a little bit like, in a way, like, not all the time art inspired like the change that we want in the world, but it's, I think, a pretty early step in that direction, that at least like the option that we're providing in terms of media is also like challenging convention of this utopia or dystopia approach that we're so familiar with. So Protopica really, like at the end of the day, is this place where we consider not just the spiritual realm, or this. We don't really want to put like a very definitive name. Like define it too strictly at this point. But really, for us, is this place where we think of the possibilities, possible futures. So thinking of possible outcomes that could occur if we were to think of this from a more proactive stance, or with just day by day, like what action we can take for that solution, for that outcome to be more attainable for the audience. So again, I know there's a lot of being based on this film, but Protopica is a much larger project. In our heads, it's a much larger vision that we currently have going on. But this film has definitely been a great way to connect with people. Everyone has expressed how it has, like, a phenomenon that we've realized is that it really has removed a lot of the angst that's around generative AI video. We've received a lot of positive feedback from people because it's really a universal message around, feeling like you're at the right place at the right time, that, regardless of what scenario situation is going on, there was a purpose for you to encounter all the challenges that you might be going through. So, when a lot of people came up to us after the screening in New York or the screening in Vancouver Festival, it's this sort of universal message that people get that, it's still very open-ended for them to interpret it whatever way they want. But it's really a materialization of, hey, like, there's still not just hope, there's still a path that could be etched from, people having this proactive perspective, really. I'll leave it at that for now.
No, that's actually very appreciated. I did see that you and Manuel extended this project into an exhibition, so I'm glad you touched on that. I think the brainwave sensor experience, using that to kind of make it a more interactive and immersive film experience, is actually really exciting. So I'm definitely looking forward to the future extensions of this project. I'm curious, what are some lessons that you've learned working with AI, working with Sora, being an alpha tester to create this short film? Like, how did these technologies kind of change your approach to how you would have normally kind of created a film or started working on a film? I'm just curious about different things you might have learned, different challenges you might have faced, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, the biggest thing has been to remain true to our agency as artists. It's really easy to give up a lot of your critical thinking to any AI model, or like any LLM model, and be like, hey, what should I make a film about? And, like, just your starting point should be still, like, very carefully crafted by your own ideas and your own views. So we're very critical of that, right? Like, we haven't wanted to just use ChatGPT or all these tools to, like, form the entirety of it. So really, as much as we're leveraging very cutting edge technology, we feel almost more drawn towards traditional ways of doing things, because that's, it's not really replacing replacing how we do things. It's augmenting how we think and what we do, and giving us a much larger output, for whatever input we have. So I always say, like, if AI is a way of augmenting our output, augmenting zero is really just zero. So if you're not really putting any thought at the starting point of this and what you're going to make your film about, what you're going to create your next narrative about, then whatever output's just going to feel very dull. And like, all I have to say, like, we've definitely honed in more in our craft in ways that we felt like we couldn't before, because now the challenging part was, like, hey, are we gonna overcome this one shot? Like, I come from a 3D animation background, so I think a lot in terms of, like, that shot is going to be like 1 or 2K or 5K in terms of hours and time and resources that we need to pull that up. But now, I've created films with Sora where I focus on creating the still renders. I still put a lot of hours into, like, creating this hyper realistic, cyberpunk bike, and I input that image into Sora, and it comes up with a lot of things in between shot A and shot B, and it's like, wow, like, it really is changing the way that I used to feel limited by to tell stories. So I think at the end of the day, the pattern I'm noticing with AI is, like, it's taking the repetitive, mundane tasks away from people and really letting them focus on much larger pictures, much larger meanings, much larger things. And to really draw into those larger things, I feel more drawn to do things that are less digital and more analog. So really, I've gone back to, like, film, like shooting film, collecting vinyl, doing pottery. So all these things are very tactile, and I really feel like actually get the motor skills or exercise sort of, like, part of your brain that's been dormant because you've been spending so much time trying to make it look good in the computer. Once you've sort of, for lack of a better term, automated that process, then you can really sit back and think about, like, what is it really you want to tell.
Right.
I think like, this whole idea of, like, AI taking agency is really up to you.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm excited for the people like more deeper things that come out of us not having to worry about, I don't know, rotoscoping someone in a shop, but just
Right.
click having
Yeah.
AI do that for us, right? So yeah, I'll
Very
leave it at
cool.
that. But yeah.
No, this is actually really appreciated. It's interesting because it sounds like the processes that you're choosing to, take agency or take responsibility for, that's sort of what separates your work while still using AI. It separates it from being reliant on it and, make still being like an artistic piece versus separating from being something like AI slop or these kind of just like quick generative, you know, assets that just kind of exist in the internet. Would that be fair to say? You're kind of separating yourself from AI slop by that?
Of course, yeah. You mentioned a little bit of like the aesthetic and some of the things that we brought into it. And that speaks to what you're asking here. It's, um, there's definitely a certain look that generative AI has right now that it's very, you can almost tell, especially with the physics. So we really lean into the flaws of, or not flaws, but like some of the limitations that the
Hmm.
model at the time. Because this film, out of all the ones that were screened in New York, was the only one that was made with the like the alpha version of the model. So
Interesting.
like at least one or two versions that are much more improved came out, and a lot of the films were made with that. So for us, it's like a testament of time where I think if you really hone in to tell a story in a specific way. So for
Hmm.
example, I've never really I've edited with audio first, but I rarely have created a piece of like this where we come up with a voiceover and build around the voiceover. So
Hmm.
Matt's voice being in Guadalupe Creole, having this aspect of cultural preservation is really important to us, and having the opportunity to do so with a layer on top that with this analog kind of look and feel and all the sound effects and all those things, for us was sort of removing this very cliche of way of showcasing the technology that's like, look, like it's high tech and it's this
Right.
like science thing. It's like, make it look as sharp and cool as possible. But it's like quite the opposite where it's like, no, let's make this like a found film that you just
Hmm.
happen to have in, someone's garage, and you open it and you played it back with this, theater, and that's what it is. So that's exactly what we wanted to accomplish, because we believe in this sort of timeless idea that is, like that. We really want to hone in timeless concepts, timeless ideas, and things that doesn't matter. You can replace AI for like hand-drawn animation that still makes
Right.
sense. So yeah, like all that to say that it's a really observant notes that you've made. So it definitely speaks to like the decisions that we've made for the film itself and the project as a whole. We want to keep honing into what makes the human experience so unique, right? It's
Yeah.
sort of like analog, tactile, and things that we can grasp onto.
It sounds like you've had the access to these emerging technologies, whether it be 3D animation, Sora, being an alpha tester, but all of those technologies have still sort of fed into your artistic pursuit, which is still kind of very analog. Like you're using AI and it can create these 30-second hyper realistic, you know, pieces of content, but your approach is still taking the film strips that AI can create, cutting them together yourself, and kind of building a narrative that's true to your vision.
Exactly, yeah. It's like not losing your agency. It is something I learned from other artists who had similar concerns, and I didn't really put a lot of thought into that like 2 years ago. But since then, it's been like, yeah, just being more. I'm a lot more aware of where to inject AI and where not to let it guide too much of my agency of an artist. So yeah, I would say like as tools get better and more like all in one. So like right now, the tendency that a lot of these tools have now is to have as many features in one
Right.
one place as possible. But really, like, that's convenient. But I think it also is this sort of slippery slope where you start to lose agency of your own ideas. Start to you stop. In my opinion, there's a critical thinking fight that we or maybe push and pull that's happening with AI. So again, kind of goes back to why I've been into education, teaching youth about it, but doing so in a way that doesn't rob them from the opportunity to use their critical thinking skills. And I think that trickles back into like us as creatives as well. Because at the end of the day, we're a younger version of ourselves expressing, like the more pure, imagination that we have. So.
Right. Thank you for your time. This was awesome. I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot about this agency question that you sort of left on the table here. I think it can help a lot of people distinguish between the uses of AI that they kind of want to enjoy and uplift versus the uses of AI that people might have second thoughts about.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, thank you so much again for the opportunity to chat, and yeah, let me know if you need anything else in the future.
Absolutely, man. Thank you again, Will. This was awesome. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it. I'll let you get back to the rest of your day.
Thank you.